Welcome back. Paul Catalina, Garrett Ross. I can tell you, so I've been using YouTube TV, and it's maybe a drug that I was maybe not ready for,
right?
But is now in my system. Garrett, you and I last year several times would put games on all of the available screens here and watch them, and that was one thing. But when I can go from quad to quad to quad, my football watching is at the highest it's ever been. And I feel like it's because I don't go to a lot of the Baylor games anymore. Like I kind of pick and choose, and because I want to watch more games. I think that since we're doing a national show, I need to watch more games. I feel like I'm more informed when I watch games as opposed to watching people talk about those games, at least on Saturdays. So I like to see as much as I can so I can describe what my real opinions are about that and not, just look at stats and numbers and a couple of highlights. If I can see a good stretch of any game, then I can tell you, yeah, man, that offensive line at LSU has really stepped up in the last 3 weeks. Or, here's why USC keeps losing. Those kind of things. Like, you can just kind of see it and get the rhythm of the game. I didn't watch all of UCF and Iowa State. I was at Brew at the Zoo, which I missed a good chunk of Texas and Georgia too, a good, a quarter and a half of it. But I saw the pertinent parts of the game. And so Brew at the Zoo, by the way, Cameron Park Zoo is a really fun thing. I think we should all go next year together where you buy a ticket and then you just walk around the zoo and you're like, hey, there's an elephant. And then you get a beer and then you try 12 different beers. And then after a while, I'm just talking to a giraffe about how he feels about life. I think that was good.
Sounds like a good time.
And then Lenny, come here. I don't think you're happy here. I get it. You want to be on the plains. But look, you and I are we're in our situations. We got to make the most of it. Looks like you got a girlfriend. She's nice. She cares about you. I got a wife who loves me. Let's just live in our truth, Lenny. Man, I love your neck. That's what happens after a bunch of them. So, so I've watched so many games. I've watched tons this year, more than I ever have. And it makes me hard. Like, when I do get to go to a game, like when I go, I feel
you're distracted.
I'm like, oh man, where are the other three? Like, I'm watching this like when I was at SMU a couple weeks ago. I'm like, okay, this is fine. Can you put 3 more over here for me?
Right.
Mostly because I also don't want to see what's going on over here anymore. I've seen enough.
You need a distraction.
Put 3 other games up. Like, can we just take one of these jumbotrons and throw up a quad up here just so we can all see what's going on? Especially us from Tallahassee here. We need
Oklahoma could have used that the other day.
Exactly. Can we just we don't need this one can be for the replays and stuff.
Yeah. For
the people who are still invested in this blowout. We would like to watch this one. And if you could put Texas and Georgia up here, if you can put, Iowa State and UCF and all that, I'd like to Alabama and Tennessee, put that in that corner,
I have a distraction real quick. So you were talking about that. So during the Louisville and Miami game, there was a shot that panned up, and you know how everybody puts their banners up and all. When I saw Louisville had one up for making the Belk Bowl, and I was like, damn, the standards really are different at some places than others.
You know what I think? I think the Belk Bowl gives you a banner, and you're like, well, you might as well put it up. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. For making it or winning it?
For winning it.
Winning it, yeah. I don't know. Louisville, their football history is good but not great. They haven't done anything. So I get that. Especially you got to get people excited about it. If you're not excited about it, your fans aren't going to be excited about it. And sometimes, even if you are excited about it, you can't sell that to your fans. Because, especially if you look at last year's Louisville team, they were fantastic all year long, lost in the ACC title game, and then it's just kind of oh, man. You get that because you feel like you're right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know. It depends on the program.
That's what I was like. I was sitting there. I was like, dang, the standards are different.
Well, look, here's the thing. If you're LSU and you wind up in the Belk Bowl or something like that, and you have the banner, you're like, hey, put this underneath. Put this where people can walk
just
through.
Bury this.
People can see it. Maybe we get one of the best players to sign it. look, Malik Neighbors signed that. There you go. You have a thing. But you don't put it up there with like 3-time national champion.
No.
There. So, yeah. Anywho, getting to it, the moment you've all been waiting for, Texas and Georgia. I've seen a lot of people say that Texas isn't ready for the SEC and all that. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily a fair assessment. What I would say, I don't think Oklahoma's
not
roster built for the SEC. I think Texas is roster built for the SEC and all that. But the fans have to get used to this is what the SEC is. This is what college football is, and the SEC is just the loudest and brightest example of it. But look, Georgia's not worried about these kind of things.
No.
You know, they might lose every now and again, pretty much just to Alabama. And, you know, that's who's got their number. No one else has their number. Anybody has their number. Georgia's the best team for the last 5 years. It's Georgia. Like, they're the team that's the guy right now.
Yep.
And I thought that's the stat was wild that Texas has only played, that was only like the 4th top 5 matchup at DKR. But if you take out all the great Oklahoma matchups, and then Arkansas in the 70s, you know, how many times would there have been a top 5 matchup at Darrell K. Royal? Really, like, A&M's never lived in the top 5. None of the other Southwest Conference or Big 12 teams, you know, really did it. I mean, Nebraska Nebraska did it at the beginning, Kansas State a couple times, but did those actually intersect at the time where both teams were top 5? That's pretty rare. Georgia's been in a lot of those.
Yep.
Recently, because of them being in the SEC as top 5, top 10 matchups, as where Texas maybe hasn't. So I think that the atmosphere in Austin, as crazy and rowdy as it was, did not affect Georgia at all. Now, neither quarterback in the game, Quinn Ewers or Carson Beck, did anything to really impress me. Not a great game for either of them, but they were also playing against 2 of the best defenses in the country. So I'll give them a slight benefit of the doubt on that. Sometimes the defenses are better. Texas has the number 1 defense in the country. And it's for that reason that I think it was only 30-15 and not 45-15, because their defense made plays and kept them reasonably in that game, especially once they made the plays in the second half to score and get back in it. Like, once the offense got going a little bit. But it was a fun game to watch. I think Texas got their first dose of reality of what it's like to be an SEC team, that week in and week out, because they're barely even into their SEC schedule. Like, week in and week out, it's tough.
But also, like, how many times in the Big 12 did Texas play a game even remotely close to that caliber of opponent after playing Oklahoma?
Oh, no, never.
Never.
I mean,
that's not something you see. So, and that's not an excuse, but that's the reality of the situation. Like, you're going to get more of that back to back to back. Also think that was a factor. You put a lot of hype and emotion, all that into a rivalry. And I know you went out there and beat the hell out of Oklahoma, and Oklahoma sucks, but at the same time, like, that's a lot of energy that goes into that, and that's something that was new to them. Well, those people haven't had to follow that type of game up with that caliber of opponent. I think Texas is still really good. I think they're one of the best teams in the country. I think they're going to be just fine. But I think that was something that played into it, and that's more of the reality that those two are facing. Like, that South Carolina team Oklahoma faced. South Carolina's really good. Like, if Lenore Sellers doesn't throw the game away a couple of times, like against LSU and Bama, South Carolina is one of the better teams in the country. So, like, I think that's more of a reality and gut check to both of those programs. Texas is definitely built better for it right now, but their crowd and everything, that atmosphere, that was definitely SEC ready.
Yeah. So, yeah, Jack, you're right. It's on Texas for a bunch of years, like, that they didn't, like, there were top 5 teams in the Big 12 and Texas wasn't.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so you're right.
No, that's a fact,
no. But, like, no, so, like, they're, but also, I mean, the SEC, sometimes these top 5 versus top 5 matchups don't wind up being that later in the year.
Yeah.
Which we talked about rankings and how kind of silly they are, right? Like, they're top 5 versus top 5, but then, you're top 5 for 6 weeks and then you lose 4 games. So, like, were you ever really a top 5 team, or were you just better than the first 6 teams?
Look at the Bama-Mizzou game, right? Like, neither one of those teams were really top 10 teams. I know it's not top 5, but it's the same kind of thing. Neither one of them were really top 10 teams when they played each other. It's the same thing.
Yeah. It absolutely is. So, yeah, it's crazy that never happened. But the big moment in that game, Garrett, was the controversy about
terrible call.
It was a bad call.
Terrible call.
But also,
you can't change it.
You can't change it.
Cannot change that call.
You can't change it in the circumstance that they changed it in.
No.
Had they made the call, then come back and then said, like, no, we're going to waive it off. Okay. But you make the call, garbage gets thrown on the field, and then you change it. Whether the garbage on the field had anything to do with it, what that officiating crew was, there's a large portion of the population who, no matter what anybody says, will always believe that call was changed because of the fans reacting the way that they did. And at least for the rest of that game, you set up a situation where what happens if Texas gets really back in it and you make another call and they do it again? Now they expect you to overturn it because it worked.
Right.
Because there's a bunch of idiots up there that think that they did something. Like, you have played into the idiocy of the moment.
Yep.
And when they changed the call, even though it was bad, they created a situation that I think is untenable, in that now, whether the fans doing that affected them or not, how can you convince somebody who has already been convinced that, if you're a Georgia fan, if you're a fan who doesn't like Texas, if you're all that, you'd be like, well, they only did that because Texas's fans threw a fit. Well, that I can't, I couldn't convince anybody of that.
Well, there's no way you can, because if that doesn't happen, then the officials don't meet for as long as they did, and then that doesn't happen. The game would go on. Like, they would have, and also if it would have been an interception, like it just would have been a PI call, I don't think that it would have unfolded like that as well. I think having it be an interception definitely played into it. It was a terrible call. And another thing, I don't like the ejection parts with these targets. Like, Georgia had 2 players that were ejected for these questionable targeting calls. And while I know they are at the same time, but that's another thing that's got to be fixed, because I don't like players being put out of games and multiple games for that. But yeah, it was that call there was interesting. It was a terrible one. The fans reacted piss poor. Like, they should be. That was pathetic.
Well, look, for all the dogging I give Texas over the years, I will say this: they respond to controversy faster and maybe more effectively than anybody. I mean, there's one back in the day that I think they probably learned their lesson on, the strength coach that was a problem. But since then, look, if you go back to Chris Beard, you go back, any time that they're faced with a PR crisis, they're like, no, here, this is what we're doing, as opposed to kind of letting the story get out of control. So they've threatened to suspend alcohol sales. The fans that have done that, they're going to identify them on video and ban them from events for the rest of the year. So they, pay the $250,000 fine, all that stuff. They're, at least in a public relations sense, out in front of it. And so, yes, I do admire that. They didn't make light of anything. They didn't be like, hey, look, this happens all the time. It's a big deal. No, they took it head on. And, yeah, the call was bad in the first place. And college officiating, people can complain about NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball. I think officiating as a whole has suffered, and mostly it's because it starts
lower.
Very lower. There needs to be a national officiating group that's job is to recruit young officials, get them in JV and high school games, get them good at that, at their mechanics, and move them up the ladder and get them confident and understanding the rules and not afraid of the masses. The problem is now, because of the kind of society we live in,
people are psychos.
And be like, this referee called a holding and costs us the game. His name's Jack McKenzie and he lives in Waco. And you're like, bro, just a holding call. Didn't kidnap him or anything. Let's deal with real crimes. And so that's why. So a lot of people don't want to do that, because you have to have a very thick skin to be an official. You really look. I have very little officiating experience, but I was an intramural ref for 3 years, and I can tell you, even in a low stakes bullshit like that, like you have to have really thick skin.
I imagine,
because people will come to you and you're like, God, dude, like, are you this like into this co-rec basketball game? Like, is this what's going to make it for you?
Yeah. This is your life.
Are they going to do a documentary on this where you sit back and go, well, you know, the refs were all over us that day, but we came out on top, and we beat the, you know, we of the Pimps 2002 beat the Skid Marks, you know, in this game. You're like, I mean, what? Who cares, right? And, you know, the higher stakes it gets, the better it needs to be. We've seen a lot of complaining and like a lot of reform on the NFL side, and they still don't necessarily get it all right. In college, there needs to be accountability. And the thing is, when you have a situation like this, it creates a further like schism between the refs and accountability, because now, like, yeah, okay, we don't want them to throw any water bottles at us.
Right.
Like, we're glad it's just water bottles and it was on the other end of the field. You know, that like then it started kind of from all angles, but mostly it was in that student section end zone there.
In a situation like that, though, like, do the refs, do they get fined or anything? Like, there's no repercussions whatsoever?
Yeah. Yeah, see, that, I mean, like, we don't know. That's the other thing, is we don't know. So, again, the public confidence is eroded in it, right? So we don't know these things. I know that in professional sports, where there's more money on the line, but still, I mean, there's a lot of money, but they still have to be accountable. Somebody, the head of the crew, has to go and talk to the pool reporter, explain why they made the calls. And then the league, like, you've seen the NFL. Like, these officials are not going to get a postseason assignment. Right. They're not going to get this. Officiating needs to come under the banner of whatever the new governing body is. And it doesn't need to be conference by conference.
Yeah, that's another thing. It needs to be just everybody as whole.
Yeah, everybody is whole. And then the other thing is, if you do that, you can move people around a little bit more. And that way it's not, you know, when you get the Tennessee-Alabama game that has, you know, a million penalties in it as well, it's not both fan bases going, oh, it's this crew again.
Yeah.
Oh, it's this guy with his big muscles. Oh, it's Glasses McGinty here. Like, all these things. Like, you really...
You shouldn't know the officials.
You should know that, like, that's a big thing. Like, you should know. Basketball almost has it this way. But there are some officials that you know.
Oh, yeah.
Higgins is, like, the most famous one, right? Like, you know. But the good thing about Higgins is he doesn't care.
No.
Like, he just keeps on blowing the whistle, calling fouls. I mean, that's so.
So this is, like,
but
totally.
Yeah, UT Parking says until they can be fined, there's zero accountability for better officiating. Yes,
there has to be something.
They have put too much cushion. And look, these guys deserve cushion. Referees deserve cushion. They need a cushion for human error. But they're not doing things to help them get better.
I also think, like, they're not, a lot of the calls, they just do this because they can make up for it with a replay. Like, they could just, you know what I'm saying? Like, replay makes up for so much error or whatever. And I think that's kind of played into this as well, knowing that you have a fallback and to make bad calls for. But yeah, I agree with you, man. Like, there needs to be a universal plan in place. The people need to be held accountable. If you're going to fight, and rightfully so, the Texas fans should be fine. Texas should be fine for what happened. But the officials should be as well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And do you think that if you're Dr. Pepper, when do you start wanting to pull that Quinn Ewers commercial? Because he needs a backup.
Look, here's the problem with
Quinn. Go for it.
Here's the
I set it up for you. Go for it.
I sent you, this text. I said, watching a game and seeing a Quinn Ewers commercial that Malik Murphy is actually playing in, where he says he reached the playoff without a backup,
it's a lie.
Meta as hell, because that's not true. Like, I'll quote Mike Gundy. That's not true.
No.
It's not true.
I just kept seeing it. I was like, please pull this damn
commercial. He's been the starter
commercial.
for 3 years, and he's needed a backup in all three of them.
Every time.
All three. And that's not him. I mean, look, he gets hurt. That was happening in football, but to do the commercial, I feel bad for, I genuinely do feel bad for Quinn because Dr. Pepper wrote this script and they thought it was funny and they just went with it.
Yeah.
But I'm betting, during that thing, he's like, yeah, but Malik was, you guys saw, we beat Kansas State with Malik. I wasn't there. I was in a sling.
Right.
You saw I was in the sling. I needed the backup for sure. No, I needed one. Yeah, absolutely. And then, that commercial was about Arch Manning, but it completely erases Malik Murphy.
Yes.
And then whoever the backup was 2 years ago when he first started, I've already forgotten.
Was that Hudson Card?
Maybe, yeah.
I think it was Hudson Card.
Hudson Card had to play.
Yeah.
They've all had to play. So, no. And not gotten to play because Texas won 55-10. They had to play because Quinn got hurt. Yeah. Come on, man. But if I were him, I would have been doing that, being none of this is true, right? They're nobody will notice. And he's like, college football fans will notice.
Somebody's going to notice this.
Yeah. You put this on during a Duke game, and Malik Murphy's parents are at least going to be like, hey, wait a minute.
Yep.
Hey, hold on. I've got a question. There was a 3-game stretch last year where he had a broken collarbone. 4 games with a broken collarbone, right?
Yep.
3 games, I guess 3.5, right?
It was a minute, yeah.
Hurt his collarbone. Yeah. No. Not cool, Quinn.
Not.
But I do feel bad for him because that's what happened. They're like, oh, this is funny. And then, who's going to notice?
Everybody.
Everybody, the college football comedian podcast that, notices the minutia of these things. Yeah, we noticed. We know.
Mm-hmm.
We know. Yeah, I see that commercial and yeah, it's funny. Had he played in all 12, 13 games last year, it would have made sense. Dead on.
Yeah.
But I'm not here for the Malik Murphy erasure.
No, not especially not after he did your team like that.
No. He didn't lose.
No.
Right? Or did he lose once?
Malik? I can't remember, honestly.
Yeah. He kept him in the playoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
They made it to the playoff in spite
of
it, right? No. Yeah. No, he didn't lose. Who did they lose to? Who did Texas lose to last year?
I don't remember.
Other than Washington.
Oklahoma?
Yes.
Yes, it was Oklahoma.
And Malik didn't play in that game. Quinn did.
Mm.
Yeah. See? Almost lost to Houston, but they didn't.
Yeah.
Almost lost to Kansas State,
but they didn't. Yeah.
Almost isn't lost. Yeah. So yeah. Barry Crawford said Ewers being alongside the Boz is fitting. Yeah, I do think it's funny that Brian Bosworth is the star of all these commercials, and had they just done this back in the 80s, it would have been perfect for him.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no. I still, yeah. And the joke, yes, Paxton, the joke is for Arch. That's what it's about. Know. But before he says that, he goes, I made it to the playoff without a backup last year. That's not what happened, though.
Yes.
That's, I'm just here for the facts. Mm. That's what I'm here. I'm here to make sure that you get factual information.
Facts don't care about your feelings.
Yeah, exactly. I'm here for facts. But look, Texas and Georgia, in spite of the fact that it wasn't necessarily close, I was very entertained by it all.
Right. No, it was a good game.
Carson Beck, 3 interceptions. He was. I'm not trying to dog him too much, but he was kind of like the de facto number 1 quarterback. But if I had to rank him, I saw that Mel Kiper had them Carson Beck 5th and Quinn Ewers 6th, which is about where I'd put those guys. Because if you're asking me who the best guys are this season, it's Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, who again not a draftable guy at 5'9",
right?
Or at least not high. But those guys have all played better than I think Beck has for sure, and Ewers the other night for sure, and he just barely kind of into the season for Quinn. I still think he's an NFL prospect, no doubt. Mm-hmm. But there are guys, if I am in the NFL draft this season and you're asking me, do I want Shadur Sanders or Cam Ward or heck, I think he'll be back next year, but even Garrett Nussmeier, to me,
I think he's going to the draft.
I mean, look, if they keep winning, he's probably going to the draft.
I think he's going to the draft.
Like if they wind up in the playoff, he's probably going to the draft.
Yeah.
But like even Garrett Nussmeier to me has been more. I've enjoyed. Like I thought he's played better.
He's had less to work with.
Yeah.
Less talent. You know, because everybody's been hurt outside of Kyler Lacey.
Yeah. So I mean, look, the C.J. Daniels that they got from Liberty was supposed to be a big thing.
He hasn't played all year.
Yeah, he hasn't played all year. That was supposed to be the guy who's supposed to take it off of Kyron Lacey. And you know, Mason Taylor's been great too. But you know, I like those three better right now today as it stands. You know, and there's probably some others if I really like dug down and thought of it to pick out before them that I think were maybe a little better equipped. Like I would say that too. Look, I'll tell you, Drew Aller's played better.
Yeah, he has
overall so far this year, and you know, Georgia keeps winning. And look, Georgia won 2 titles with Stetson Bennett, so it's not like, you know, when you have all of that around you. And I can list: Oklahoma won a national title with Josh Heupel.
Yeah.
Miami won a national title with Quinn Ewers. Ohio State won with Craig Krenzel. You know, so it's not. Alabama won with Brody Croyle, right? So you're Jacob Coker, A.J. McCarron. Like, it's not – you have to be at the pinnacle of college quarterbacking, but just because you're a great NFL quarterback doesn't mean you're going to be – you know, you did much in college. Matthew Stafford can never get over the hump, right?
Right.
You know, but he's been a really good, fantastic pro, so it's different. But Quinn said the injury is still bothering him post-game. If that's the case, you should be on the bench. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, he should.
Yeah, let it heal. I get that you don't want, like, you know, it's I when Arch Manning is there and he's as good as he is, the fear of getting Wally pipped is gonna be there.
Right.
But
I also think that's one where if they let Arch play and Quinn got healthy, we saw it with the Oklahoma game. They're going to put Quinn back out there, right? I don't think necessarily that Arch would steal that job. I think they want to try to maintain Arch to be as healthy as he possibly can to ride him out into the future. And while you have Quinn available, he's a high caliber enough quarterback. You're going to play him if he's healthy. I don't think that Arch is going to necessarily come in and take the job over unless Quinn continues to struggle, because he hasn't been great. Like, I mean, he's looked average at best for the most part, but I don't think that Texas necessarily or Sark wants to necessarily put Arch in there and just let him ride. I don't think that's the case. I have a question for you.
okay.
So with USC's embarrassing loss to Maryland this weekend, and Oklahoma's loss to South Carolina, which one of these programs bit off more than they can chew, and who do you see being able to turn it around first?
USC. I think they can still get talent out there. That is the most confounding thing, because I don't really know what's wrong with USC all that much. I mean, Miller Moss is good. They've got, you know, good running backs. They've got good wide receivers. The defense is playing better.
Is it just coaching? Like Lincoln
they're
Riley
just not very good in the moment. Now, look, the defense was not fantastic against Maryland, particularly in the second half. I mean,
but Maryland's not good.
No, they're not. So, yeah, I thought after that LSU game, and I think they probably like mustered up all their strength for the LSU game.
Yeah, that was
got
one
them. They made like,
they
of course, there was like one of the craziest catches ever made in that one.
Yeah.
Usually, when you see stuff like that happen, the team that makes that once in a lifetime play wins.
Mm-hmm.
You know, David Tyree.
Yeah.
You know, like you're not going to lose it. Like when you catch a ball like this,
Yeah,
you're not going to lose that. When the wide receiver, whose name I forget right now for USC, like jumped up and like caught the ball like Spider-Man, you're not going to lose that game. Like things are going, like things have turned that way normally. You know, I will say this: the Odell Beckham catch that everybody
one against Canales,
they did lose that game. But it was still a sick
awesome.
catch. But they did lose that game. But that's my outlier.
right?
But yeah, I don't know. USC can still doesn't have a talent issue. I think they have a functionality issue, which I think Lincoln Riley needs to get under control. And also Lincoln Riley might have been figured out a little bit. He might need to, change some things up. I wonder how much his heart's in it as much as it was when he first started, because the game has changed. And I do think that he was thinking about the NFL a little bit, and he still might. And I think if Cliff Kingsbury can get an NFL job off of getting fired at Texas Tech, then so can Lincoln Riley having a mediocre year at USC.
No, I agree with that.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see Lincoln maybe throw his name in the ring for an NFL job and see where that goes. I don't know. There's been a lot of stuff since he's been out there that just didn't seem characteristic to who he was in his early going at Oklahoma. And I think Brent Venables is going to be feeling a lot of pressure.
Oh, he is.
Because they have no talent on offense. No. And that's not Oklahoma.
Well, I mean, I think they have talent.
Here's the other thing. Yeah. Now, did OU get caught a little bit off guard when Lincoln Riley left and went to USC? Yes. But the reason that Texas was set up to do it is because Chris Del Conte went out and he hired Steve Sarkisian. And when they were hiring him and they hired him, he said, okay, you've been in the SEC. What's the difference between the Big 12 teams that we see and the SEC teams that we see? And Steve Sarkisian said, we have to get bigger. We have to do this. And Brent Venables came in, and he had the same directive, and clearly he hasn't done that. Now, look, they lost a lot of guys in the transfer portal at once, but you're Oklahoma. Like, whatever they did to, offset that was wrong from the start, and they haven't really regained it.
Mm. Well, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily – that's what confuses me, because I don't necessarily think Oklahoma's offense isn't talented. Like, I think Taylor Tatum is going to be a stud at running back. I think you have the Jackson Arnold situation is still kind of baffling, though. That's the one that I'll kind of give him a pass on that. I think he just hasn't lived up to it. But you have no receivers. Your whole receiver core has been depleted, so you have nobody to really throw the ball to. I think it's just kind of been a weird circumstance. I don't think it's necessarily a lack of talent for Oklahoma. I just think that you're in a unique spot there where you were spoiled so long with such high-caliber Heisman quarterbacks that you're naturally going to regress there, kind of like we're seeing with Bama regressing from a coaching standpoint when you have, elite talent up there. Elite coaching with Saban, but I don't necessarily think it's a talent thing. I think there's just something off there. And while Seth Luttrell might be a scapegoat, I don't think it's going to get any better throughout the season for them, but they're going to have to figure it out. Maybe you try to get I don't know how you fix it, but I'm not sure that – I think it's more so coaching and development on the offensive side of the ball than it is talent. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question, Garrett. That is a great question.